Welcome back to another week. I'm so excited for you all to meet our guest this week. Amanda Tice is a successful curve model who has worked the past 12 years for and with well-known retail clients such as Nordstrom, Target, Saks, and Hanes. Since becoming a mom, Amanda built her background in comparative human development to lead a mom revolution aimed at helping mothers tap into their inner wisdom and uncover hidden truths about motherhood to thrive postpartum and beyond. Everyone, please say welcome to Amanda Tice. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on your show.
Oh my gosh, it is such a pleasure. So I always start out with asking people how we know each other. And of course we don't, because I've been following you and I reached out to you in your direct messages on Instagram and you were kind enough to say yes. And I thank you for spending the time with me today.
Of course. Instagram is amazing, really. I mean,
Amazing.
I have to say, as much as I don't love social media for a
Yes.
variety of reasons,
Yes.
when things transpire like this, I'm always like, okay, there's a reason why I'm still active on this because it can
Yes.
be life-changing. Really, it's wild.
It really can be. And I've really gotten a lot of good I do recognize the mom shaming, the Pinterest momming, the performative parenting, all of that. And certainly have I gotten the enjoy it while it lasts, or it gets easy, or whatever it might be. And so I've gotten a number of that, but I really have had such beautiful connections with people, just kind of slipping them a note and being like, hey, can we chat?
Yeah, totally. Honestly, talk about crazy. I found my publisher on Instagram.
No
So,
way.
oh yeah. So life is weird that way. Like if you're open to the energy that's out there, I feel like sometimes you can get really positive feedback. It's not always positive, but I have found that, it can be a wonderful tool for connecting
Mhm.
people.
Yeah, that's so great. So I'd love to learn, share with the team here a little bit more about your background. How did you get into modeling?
So the way I got into modeling was actually kind of a fluke. I was on the older side. I was 25 at the time that I
Uh-huh.
started. I was a news reporter and an anchor at the time, and I was freelancing for MSNBC and a couple of other like smaller outlets in New York City.
Hmm.
And this will age me, but 2008, the economy tanked, and all of these clients that I was freelancing for said, hey, we can pay you half of what
Yeah.
we were paying you before. And I was just floored. I was like, I'm living in New York City. How am I going to make extra money? How am I
Mhm.
going to be able to do this?
Yeah.
And I met this photographer on a job, and he said, you should look into plus size modeling. And at the time, because that was, 2000, beginning of 2009, I
Mhm.
was like, what's plus size
Yeah.
modeling? Now, granted, plus size modeling had existed, of course, by the
Sure.
time that I entered that field, but it wasn't what it is today. That's for sure. And
Right.
so I said, hey, I need to make some extra money. And I went to an open call at Wilhelmina. And
Wow.
believe it or not, they signed me that day, and it totally changed my life overnight.
Oh, I have
Yeah.
chills. That is epic. Amazing.
Well,
Wow,
the
Wilhelmina,
funny
thank
thing
you.
is, I didn't realize how unusual it was to be signed from an open call because I didn't
Mm,
really know anything about the modeling industry.
sure.
And so not only did I come in with like, I went to Kinko's, which I don't even know if Kinko's still exists,
I don't
but, but I went to Kinko's and printed like little 5x7 pictures of myself. And they were like, yeah, we maybe sign one person a year on an open call.
know. Wow.
They're like, sometimes it's like 2 year, we get one person every 2 to 3 years.
Oh
So
my
it
gosh.
was really like, getting a big break, and
Yeah.
it was completely life-changing. I feel like I've just been one of those people who, I don't know, I'm always open to new opportunities, and I try to
Mhm.
give off this energy of like, okay, universe, I'm listening. What's happening? Let me just show up. Let me try something. And it's unbelievable how when you put that energy into the universe, how things can change so quickly. And
Mm.
for me, really with the modeling, it was overnight. It was like 1 minute I was being a reporter, and the next minute I completely quit doing that. And I was traveling all over the world for work, and I was
Yeah.
thriving in a completely different way than I ever thought possible.
Right. And it wasn't even a vision of yours or a goal. It was just like somebody mentioned it to you casually one day, hey, check it out. And then boom.
Pretty much. I mean, I will say I'd always been interested in fashion.
Yes.
Growing up in the 80s, I think everyone
Yes.
idolized the supermodels
Yes.
and, Cindy Crawford and Nikki Taylor and, wanting to be beautiful in a certain way. But I never thought that it was going to be a career path of mine. I mean,
Yeah.
my mom, when I was younger, I was like, oh, it would be so fun to be a model. And she'd always say, Amanda, you're going to college. She's like, we're not going through this, find an agency at 16, because, that's what it was when I was younger,
Oh, sure.
and then wait until you're done with your career to go to college, if you want to go to college. And my mom just very much put the kibosh on that and said,
Yes.
no, not doing that. You're going to have a real career. You're going to, which modeling has been my career now, which is funny how that's changed.
Yes.
But at
Yes.
the
Yes.
time she was like, no, you're not doing that.
Right.
So it was,
Yeah.
it was funny that day that I walked into Wilhelmina, because I remember calling my mom on the phone in the room where I'm like supposed to sign this contract. And I was like, should I sign this? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know anything about this.
Yes.
And my mom's like, I don't see anybody else offering you a modeling contract. I think that you should just go with it,
That's so funny. And of Wilhelmina, I mean, God, I'm sure there are people listening to the podcast who are like, what's a modeling agency? Of course. But I think a lot of people are familiar with Wilhelmina for sure. So that's huge. That's so
Yeah.
great. That's so fun. And so through your experiences there, is that part of that is what led you when you became a mom? That's kind of where you thought all of that together. Tell me more about kind of the process with your book. I know you mentioned finding your publisher on Instagram, but like obviously
Yes.
all that led up to that.
Well, honestly, I think that the catalyst to writing my book was more so the pandemic. I think it
Oh,
was one of those things where I had started writing about motherhood, and I'd always really loved to write. I went to the University of Chicago, and they have a very rigorous background in terms of, writing skills. And I just enjoyed writing. And once I became a mom, I felt this sense of like, why didn't anyone tell me this? There are so many things about motherhood that I just felt were secret and weren't really shared even between moms, because there was so much shaming that would happen
yes.
when it came to talking about these, more taboo topics. And so, when George was about, I want to say 15, 16 months old, I just felt this calling of, I need to tell other mothers that what they're going through is completely normal, and it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not know what you're doing. It's okay to feel all the things you're feeling. And I just felt like there was a need in the marketplace for a book that would kind of fill that void. And
Yes.
not in a way that was a scientific book, but more in a way of like, hey, I'm another mom. I'm here to like hold your hand and walk you through this and make you feel
Yes.
like everything you're going through is totally normal. And, part of it too was a lot of things are easier said and read than done. And so, a big component of my book as well was having journal exercises at the end of each chapter for you to reflect on how you personally felt about that particular topic that I address, but then also giving you an exercise you can do to really reframe how you look at something when it comes to motherhood, and making sure that you're doing the things that will be able to change your mindset or your framework about a particular obstacle that you may be facing. So, when it came to the whole modeling thing too, I also felt this sense of no one's talking enough about how damaging bounce back culture is. I, as a plus size model as well, my body is constantly scrutinized, right? So it's something
Yeah.
I always have to be aware of. It's something that I was very worried about when I got pregnant. And I did have like some body dysmorphia when it came to seeing myself in a completely different way.
Mhm.
And then also having this feeling of like, am I going to still be able to model after I have a baby? Because I saw so many friends of mine who became moms and then stopped modeling
Yeah.
because their body didn't bounce back to the way it was, supposed to be, quote
Uh-huh.
unquote.
Big air
Uh,
quotes. Yeah. Yeah.
yes. So I felt this sense too of really opening up a narrative about why, bounce back culture is really damaging, and letting moms know that, hey, you are never going to be that person you were before. And that's actually beautiful. And that's okay. And that's
Mhm.
something that should be embraced, and something that culturally and socially we need to get there. So being able to put that message out and being able to show my body now as a plus size model who's 38 and a mom
Mhm.
and has stretch marks and cellulite and wrinkles, all the things, I think was an important message that I was not getting 5 years ago
Mhm.
when, I had my son. And it's a
Mhm.
message that's starting to get out there more, but we're still not there yet. It's like
Mhm.
we need more of this narrative to become normalized instead
Mhm.
of being more abnormal.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been such a beautiful experience for me with this show to be able to talk to mothers and professionals and all walks of everything in the perinatal space. And I cannot tell you how many people sit in this space and say, I became the person I needed when I was going through it, or I wrote the book about what I would have liked to have had when I was going through it, or some form of that, because there is so much knowledge and energy and everything out there for us available, and yet not all of it is helpful. The narrative is not always positive, empowering, encouraging. And so it's so great to hear that you were like, nope, I'll do this. I got it. This one's on me.
I did feel the sense of moms need to know, right? And I
Yeah.
felt, because I had a ton of postpartum anxiety as well.
Mhm.
And I just felt so alone in that experience, because
Mhm.
despite having one really good mom friend who I could share everything with, my other mom friends, they didn't want to talk about this stuff. They were afraid to talk about this stuff,
Mhm.
when it came to how hard breastfeeding was, or when it came to postpartum sex, or
Mhm.
when it came to like, even, I know this is a little bit more morbid, but like the fear of death and responsibility and all these things
Absolutely.
that mothers are always thinking, but kind of afraid to say out loud, because we have
Mhm.
been taught that we're not really supposed to talk about these things.
Mhm.
And so, a book is also a good way to kind of hide behind, meaning like I can say all of this stuff as much as I want. I can write it and have other people consume it, but I don't necessarily have to verbalize that in
Yes,
person. So
absolutely.
writing it was one process. And then now being in a place where I do podcast interviews and I talk about it on my social media page and whatnot is a totally different energy,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's having to really own everything that I've written and be very transparent about all of those things.
Mhm.
So, I guess I pride myself on being an open book,
Yeah.
because I feel like that's really the only way that people are going to be comfortable enough to embrace themselves.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
that's kind of where I've landed when it comes to that.
It's so important because just the more people that we have out there expressing the importance of all of those things and normalizing and validating the experiences, I mean, we're still overcoming that, we're supposed to be grateful to be a mother, and we're supposed to be smiling all the time, and compassion and cheerful and warm hugs. And yes, those are amazing, all of those things, when that's in that space you are. And sometimes it's okay to not be okay, but is it? We know that it is, but societally, the narrative doesn't always reflect that.
True, 100%.
Yeah.
I think that there are conflicting messages for sure when it
Yeah.
comes to that sort of thing. The thing
Uh-huh.
that always drives me crazy too is the pressure of thinking that moms can really have it all. meaning they can have a career, be a wonderful mother, do self-care, like have all of the things. But that's such an unrealistic expectation to be projecting on to mothers, because at the end of the day, there are only so many hours, right?
That's right.
So, people forget, like you can't, something's got to give at one point. I have a chapter in my book even called When All the Balls Fall. And it's because when you're trying to juggle too much, one ball will eventually drop. And I think moms put so much pressure on themselves based on what they absorb from the media about what the expectations are for being a mom. And so, I'm really glad, like you said, that there are more people and more resources now for moms that are pushing more in the direction of like, no, this is not true. You need to figure out what works for you, and what works for you is 100% okay. And it may be completely different for someone else. So I think that's an important message that women also need to realize, is that this whole comparison culture is very damaging, right? Like we don't need to be competing, right? My life as a mom of one is going to be very different than someone's life as a mom of three.
Sure.
Right. And so I feel like that's also another thing that needs to be addressed when it comes to motherhood is it's okay that you're doing things differently. It's okay that, maybe you can only handle so much. It's okay that, anything that's your experience as a motherhood, as a mother is totally okay. Right. I think that's the bottom line.
Yes. Like it's okay. You are okay. Everyone is still breathing. Everyone, left with 2 shoes on their feet, maybe to go to school. Maybe they didn't. I don't know, but everyone is okay. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that is absolutely, it's powerful to continue to hear that story, because that comparison culture is just so toxic. It's so, we are physically different human beings. Our babies are different. We don't need to compare their size or their ability to do hand sign language or how many words they have. Now, I know like your pediatrician is going to ask you that, and that's a medical conversation, but like betwixt mothers, we just got to let it go. And it's, I think we do that comparison culture really is, it's thriving, unfortunately, and working to run the opposite direction of that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I also, I talk about in my book as well, that I think is so important to realize is just how much of the marketing world plays into this narrative too. And how the images you're constantly absorbing are not real. Even pictures of myself have been, photoshopped, right? So when I look at myself, in a campaign or in a catalog, I have to remind myself, oh wait, no, that's not actually how I look. Like that is an AI version of me. Right. And I feel like the problem is we're absorbing in imagery constantly that is filtered and just not real. So we think that is what the reality should be, but it's not. It's just not possible. And I think it's super damaging for, all people, women, men, whatever, because we have this expectation that we should look a certain way and have certain things and do certain things. And it's just unattainable. Right.
Yes.
And it's
absolutely.
Crazy. But I always say, what would marketers do if we actually believed that we were good enough? What would they be able to do? Nothing, right? They wouldn't be able to sell us products. So at the end of the day, their goal is to make you think that you're flawed so that you need to buy X, Y, or Z product in order to fulfill that need or that flaw that you have. So, the sooner that culturally we can get to a place where more mothers, more women feel that they are good enough, the sooner like there will be less products to sell.
Yes.
And we'll hopefully have a better mental health when it comes to our bodies and our frame of mind.
Yeah. It's so interesting. So my girlfriend, well, it's a long story. She got married last year in the pandemic. So it's a very small wedding. And now a bunch of us are going to Cabo in a couple of weeks to celebrate their year anniversary, which I could not be more excited about. And of course, now I'm even thinking like, oh, should I say that I'm excited to get some time away from my kids? Because I don't want people to judge me for being excited about, but like, yeah, I'm excited to sleep in. I'm excited to go to the pool and not worry about sunscreening somebody else and chasing and water floaties and all of that. Like, it's going to be nice. And also it's been really interesting to have the conversations with so many people who I know are going about our bodies. Months ago, people were like, gotta start that Cabo diet, gotta start it. We gotta be bathing sweaty, da, da, da. And I'm like, I mean, apart from massive not but massive is dramatic. I apologize. Apart from probably a pretty simple plastic surgery situation for me, like my C-section overhang is just gonna be part of me now. And it produced 2 beautiful little babies. And while a flat stomach would be, I guess I will admit that it would be nice. Like, it's just not a reality for me. And so it's interesting to like the self-talk that comes, I think we're the same age. So we are of the Victoria's Secret runway show of the aughts. We grew up with the supermodels of the 80s, the Kate Moss era of it all. And so that is just the worldview for like, that's my natural default setting.
Right.
That is pretty. That is hard work. That is what you should look like if you pay attention to things. And then now being able to be like, okay, snap out of it. That's not, I mean, not that that's not real. I hate when people say like real women's bodies, like, oh, tall and thin. And those are real women's bodies too. But this is my body.
Right.
And I'm just going to have to, it's all okay. And it's been really interesting to see how many of my friends who are going on this trip are like, gotta get ready for Cabo, gotta get ready for Cabo, gotta get ready. It's like
totally. And it takes a lot of internal work to get there. I mean, for me, and I talk about this in my book too, but I like to call all of my postpartum scars, cellulite, wrinkles, skin tags. I call them my mom jewels.
Yes, I love that.
Or my mom jewelry.
Yes, I love that.
And because they are a physical representation of what my body went through to make my son, who I'm in love with, right?
Yes.
So, when I look in the mirror sometimes and I'm like, oh my God, my body just doesn't look how I want it to look, or I hate this about, I hate this skin tag, or I hate this scar, or whatever it is. I just have to tell myself, no, this is my mom jewelry. Like, this is my mom, these are my mom jewels. And there's something very beautiful about having a physical sign of giving birth. And I think culturally, we're just not there yet. Like, men and the way that we view the postpartum body is so different than it should be, but we need to get there. We need to keep talking about it. We need to keep normalizing it. Yeah. And we need to keep seeing these bodies that are, like you said, real bodies are also skinny bodies, but even the skinny bodies half the time are photoshopped, right?
Also photoshopped.
So, we need to see real bodies, as in, even though that person has a flat stomach, they probably still have some wrinkles in there. There's still, or they have a mole on their belly, or whatever it is that's been taken off, right?
That's right.
So,
and it's been interesting to see the ad campaigns these days with diverse faces, with diverse bodies, with everything, freckles and crow's feet wrinkle, it's a really lovely thing. Even, gosh, I don't want to date this episode too much, but the day that we're recording this, I don't know if you're familiar with Hocus Pocus, the movie.
Yes.
So the second one came out, and it's interesting. My girlfriend and I had started watching it a little bit during our lunch break, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at all of the faces in this one. And then I reflected back to the one from 1993, and it's like almost entirely a white cast. Like right. And so it's just a really beautiful space to be able to see that we're pushing forward.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're also bringing some of that baggage with us. And so it's trying to kind of dismantle that a little bit as we go along. But yeah, I love the idea of the mom jewels, the mom jewelry, because it's a physical, like, you hold on to the physical representation of creating such a beautiful life.
Well, and it's really crazy to me if you think about it, how when you're pregnant, there
Mhm.
is just constant barrage of, oh, you're glowing, you look so magical,
Yes, yes,
and then as soon as you give birth, I mean, within a week of
yes,
giving birth, there is
yes,
this expectation your body needs to somehow jump back to the way it was before you had
yes,
that baby.
yes.
And it's just so wrong. We need to
Uh-huh.
get to a point where people say, oh, well, this postpartum body is gorgeous because this postpartum body gave birth, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
give moms and women the space to see and to show that this body is just as beautiful, if not more beautiful, than the body that you had before you had
mhm.
your baby.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that the envelope is being pushed out there, at least in the fashion industry, on a more mainstream level, which is great. I love that I can walk into a Target now and actually see unretouched images of plus size
Yes.
women in bathing suits.
Yes.
And even from like an ageism standpoint,
Mhm.
lately I've been working a lot for Talbots, and I love the fact that they use models who are 40, 50, 60 years old.
Mhm.
And that's just not what a lot of the industry sees. They
Yeah.
are, I feel like, one of the pioneers in that regard to
Mhm.
really showing that as you age, you are still beautiful. I mean, I I feel very thankful. I got to work with Nikki Taylor a couple weeks ago.
Oh my gosh.
She's stunning, let me tell
Wow.
you.
Wow.
And the nicest human being ever.
Oh.
But it's one of those things where, like, even though she is a quote unquote supermodel of the past,
Uh-huh.
she's aged beautifully, and she's just
Mhm.
as beautiful as she was when she was 17 or 18 years old.
Right.
And women should be able to open up a catalog or magazine and see more women that look like her right
Mhm.
now,
Mhm.
in the age that she is,
Mhm.
having been a mom, having, been through all of this stuff.
Mhm.
So I really have to give a lot of credit to that brand for pushing the limits a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
I worked as well. I was in New York this past week with Coco Mitchell, and she was the first Black Sports Illustrated model. I
Wow.
want to say I don't know if she's in her 50s or 60s. And let me tell you, that girl works. I
Yeah.
mean, she's got the gray hair. She's just working it. And I
Yeah.
feel like there are not enough models like her that are out there. But the fact that she's working as much as she is telling me that the industry is trying to move in that direction. And I
Mhm.
think that's really exciting.
It is exciting. It's nice to recognize that beauty does not need to be one size fits all, because I mean, it's not, but that even the industry is recognizing that and allowing people to feel more comfortable in their own skin and not try to achieve somebody else's ideal, and just being able to say, like, this is what I look like and this is nice.
Yeah, exactly. It's an important move in the right direction. And I'm really
Yeah.
glad that it's happening.
Yeah. And I know in your book, and you mentioned it earlier when we were chatting about postpartum sex, and I think I actually would really love to get a sex therapist or some sort of professional on to just do an entire episode, because we don't talk about it. And it
True.
is it is such a thing in various ways. Like my experience, your experience, everyone's experience may or may not be similar or wildly opposite, but it is, all of it is a consideration. And we just, yeah, we don't talk about it enough.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I just think that a lot of people feel uncomfortable talking about sex in
Mhm,
general.
mhm.
And it's one of those things where we're all having sex. It's like it's the same thing. It's like we all have boobs, but like there is there is this
Yes.
strange stigma that has lingered for so long when it comes to these topics, and I feel like they just need to be more openly discussed.
Mhm.
And it's the same thing. Not that I want to get into anything morbid, but I have a whole
Right.
chapter on death in the book
Yes.
too, because I
Mhm.
think, at least for me, the moment I became a mother was also the moment that I had an intense fear of my child dying. I know
Mhm.
that sounds probably crazy,
Uh,
but as an anxious
no.
person,
Yes.
I, there, all of a sudden you're like, okay, there's this little person I am now responsible for, what happens if something happens to me? What happens if something happens to them? What happens if something happens to my husband? And again, this is not something that a lot of people feel comfortable talking
That's
about
right.
with their friends. And I
Mhm.
think it's something that should be more openly discussed,
Yes.
so that at least, you're planning for the future. I mean, there
Mhm.
are actual ways to deal with this anxiety that I do
Mhm.
talk about in my book, that people don't want to think about, but they need to think about. Right.
Absolutely. Well, those thoughts are intrusive and they can be scary. I mean, I literally have a book sitting right over my bookshelf over here. It's called Dropping the Baby and Other Scary Thoughts. It's by Karen Kleiman, if anybody's interested in reading it. But it's literally called Dropping the Baby. And it talks about like the catastrophic thinking that naturally occurs, even if you wouldn't have necessarily been the kind of person who was pessimistic, glass half empty, the world's going to end view, but then you are responsible for this human. And my biggest fear in the beginning was that I would die and nobody would be able to take care of this baby. Like obviously that's not true.
Right.
I'm very
Right.
lucky to have a great support system, but that was my biggest fear. I was walking around with this anxiety of like, I need to eat healthier. I need to make sure I check 17 times before I cross this intersection, make sure no one's coming, just because it's like
Yeah.
I've committed to raise this child, and then what happens if I'm not here and then I can't uphold that commitment? I mean, they're not they're not crazy thoughts. I just want other people to know, like, we have these thoughts and they're normal.
Yeah.
They are stressful and we can work on them, and
Right.
they are normal. You are not crazy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, the thing that I find totally fascinating too is if you look at the statistics on the number of people who have will and trust now, that number
Yes.
has gone down substantially. And I
Interesting.
think that's because people are not talking about it. They're trying
Yeah.
not to think about it. They don't
Mhm.
think they need to think about it. Right. But it is important to make the time and the space to go and write a will. And
Mhm.
if you are someone who is extremely anxious, like I am, about, what would happen in the event if something happened to me or my husband, that means that you need to go out and buy a life insurance policy,
Mhm.
right? I didn't even know up until I had George, I wasn't thinking about life insurance. What was life insurance for? I thought that was
Right.
something for my parents,
Right.
so it's like there are ways to help assuage that anxiety that you have about these things,
Right.
but someone just needs to tell you, right? Like you just need to know. And
Yes,
so I just felt like that chapter was a really important one,
it
because
is.
women just don't want to think about it, and they're afraid, and they think that what they're thinking is not normal. Like you
Yes.
said, but it's 100% normal. I think it's instinctual, in fact.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's our reptile brain kicks in and we start to realize the realities of the world and that things can happen. And before, when you're young and carefree and you don't have to worry about keeping another human alive, or maybe that's not everyone's experience in their younger years, but and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, that could happen, and it's like speaking about it doesn't increase the likelihood of it occurring. Like you actually, that's a great point that you brought. Like if you have plans in place, not that it would suck any less for you to die, but
Right.
then
Of
you
course
can know
not.
that people are taken care of in a
Yes.
meaningful way. And so, yeah, like this very, very good to look into all of that stuff. But even as you said too, you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't even
Right.
think about it, and thank goodness that you've brought it up in your book to be able to say, like, hey, y'all, heard of life insurance? Not just for your parents. Y'all need it
Right.
too.
Right, exactly. Well, and the other thing that I have found helped me is there are times when I'm like, oh, I really want George to know this, either about me
Yeah.
or about, my mother, or a story or whatever it is. Take those, 10 minutes and write it down on a piece of paper and save it for,
Mhm.
save it for your child.
Yeah.
There, there isn't this there isn't this stigma of like you have to keep everything in your head, right? At the
Mhm.
end of the day, if you can actually put things on paper, not only does it help to relieve you and your
Yes.
anxiety about what you're going through, but then there's an actual physical representation of what it is that you're feeling.
Mhm.
And if that's something that's really important, you can always seal it in an envelope and put it in the safe, and then whenever the time came, it would at least be there for your child.
That's
So
beautiful.
there are ways, I feel like, when that anxiety kicks, to help rein them back. If you're
Yes.
someone like me who kind of runs with it, where you're like, oh, I'm so panicked, right? Like, I don't know what to do. It's like I said, part of the reason I have so many exercises as well in my book is I can be a very anxious person. And because of that, it really helps me to have exercises I can do and say, okay, let me take a step back from this. How can I make this anxiety seem more reasonable
Mhm.
or put this anxiety to bed? And that's
Yes.
kind of tools that I've used to
Yes.
help me get through certain obstacles.
That's amazing. And I really love it too. So I have journals. A girlfriend of mine gifted me. It was like notes to my daughter as you grow up, something like that. And so I got one for my son too, 2 years too late, but we're catching up.
Yeah.
And so I write little notes to them at least once a month, usually more, that just are like, oh, you did this, or oh, you did that, or my daughter broke her leg a couple months ago. And
Oh
so I
no.
gave her a little update about how she was just, you had no responsibility to be a champion. You had every right to whine about it, but you were a little trooper and you went, so just little note. But I like this too, because there's nothing wrong with putting a little something about me in there. Like, hey, did you know your mom likes to rock climb? Or, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, you've just given me another idea for that, that could be really meaningful and fun. Of course, I'm sure that they'll enjoy getting to learn about themselves as young children and babies, but could be also fun to pepper in, like, oh, your dad likes this or does that. And I keep trying to get him to do it, but his handwriting is even worse than mine, so he's like, I
No, but it
promise
is
I
nice.
will.
I mean, I love when my mother tells me stories,
Yeah.
but I would love to have something where I could read about, a certain time in her life, how she was feeling when she was a mother and I was little, because she barely remembers that time. When I talk to her about it, she's like, it seems like a big blur because I was just go, 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 go all the time. And,
Mhm.
she was going through all these emotional things, career things. And I just would have liked now as a reference to be able to read about what
Mhm.
she was going through so that I would have kind of a framework for if what I was experiencing was similar. So,
Absolutely.
that's just the similar mentality to have about writing about your experiences too.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that's really fun and interesting for your kids because it
Mhm.
helps give them a sense of like, oh, okay, well, my mom went through this too. So this is
Mhm.
totally normal and this is totally natural.
Yes, yes. Because I do recognize even now, the things that seem fuzzy, and I'm so grateful that I'm a mother in the time of digital photography, because I'm just constantly like snap, 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 video, video, because I do want to be able to look back on those things, and sometimes I'll even just like write a little note and post it on my Facebook, and because I'm like, I just want to remember that my son said this in years to come when it pops up on the memories. And but yeah, and even too though, there is a lot of power in writing. We talk about journaling as a very legitimate therapeutic technique, and writing it out, getting it out of your head, very helpful for you. And then having that record for your kids moving forward is really, really special. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's so wonderful. So I was wondering, everyone, of course, has a very unique journey, but I was just wondering if you had recognized some kind of other different common themes that you've been experiencing, perhaps in your social circles, certainly in social media, anything else that kind of pops to mind about that we can kind of help parents feel that they're not alone. We are here with them.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, in my book, which I'm just going to open really quickly,
Yeah.
I just have so many different topics that I feel like cover exactly what you're talking about.
Hmm.
So, I
Hmm.
have an entire chapter it's called Mombi, and that's, how to survive the sleep apocalypse. Because
Yeah.
I will tell you, my son is 5.5 and he still doesn't sleep through the night.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
I feel like that's another topic that I feel like a lot of moms deal with is, the sleep deprivation and also just that whole experience of sleep training with your kids. And that's something
Hmm.
again that people feel a little uncomfortable talking about
Yes.
that I feel
Yes.
like needs to be discussed and is extremely normal. I also talk about making mom friends and why that's so important
Yes.
and making sure that you are doing those things that may feel awkward and uncomfortable at the beginning to make
Mhm.
sure that you kind of solidify a community around yourself that help to support you in times when you really need them. Because
Yes.
there's no better friend than a mom friend when you're a mom.
Yes.
And your friends that don't have children, they can't understand as much as they want to understand. They can't understand. So
Mhm.
being able to prioritize those friendships who have kids of similar age can be really life-changing in a
Yes.
positive way. So I have a whole section on mastering the art of making mom friends and
Mhm.
where you can find them and where you can meet them.
That is
Um,
a big one because it's especially post-pandemic. I mean, we moved to Kansas City in March of 2020, and we had envisioned like every time we've moved somewhere, we've been able to build a little community. And then, of course, being here, it's like, hi, neighbor across the street. I see you have children, but don't come close to me. So, and right,
right.
we know each other. And so now it's like, and then just as an adult anyway, like that organic ability to find and create relationships. We were at the park last weekend, and my kids were playing with this other set of kids, and as they were leaving, I was like, is it weird if I give you my phone number? Because I knew we
Yeah.
established that we lived in the same neighborhood, and I was like, can I just give you my phone number? The kids seem to be having fun, and she was like, yes, that would be so great. And I'm like, thank you for not thinking I'm too creepy, but
I mean, there is a lot of that. I feel like, I talk about going on mom dates, right? Like
yes.
you do have to put yourself out there sometimes in a very uncomfortable way.
Mhm.
But I will say the majority of my best mom friends are the ones that I have met that way. I mean,
Yes.
I literally met one of my best friends through we were in Target at the same time. Her daughter was having a meltdown. My son was having a meltdown. I noticed that her daughter was wearing like a t-shirt of the school where my son was about to start school. And so I said, hey, does your kid go here? Can I have your number and like ask you some questions about the school?
Yeah.
So there is always a way to like make that connection with another mom that then can
Yes.
really transform your life.
Yes.
So, that's a really big one that I think is important. I also think people forget I have a chapter called Finding Joy in the Mundane.
Mhm.
And I think that's another thing is how monotonous motherhood can be.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what we see online is like, oh, today we're at the zoo, tomorrow we're at the aquarium, because we're only seeing those pockets
Right.
of being active and doing things constantly. We're not seeing all of that extra time where it's folding laundry and doing dishes and
Yes.
making
Yes.
dinners and
Yes.
just how boring that part of your life can be. And the fact that not only is it okay for it to be boring, but also finding ways to make those mundane activities more fun,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So, honestly, my entire book is focused on all of those things. It's
Yes.
focused on all of those things that are really normal motherhood experiences,
Yes.
but for whatever reason are considered taboo.
Mhm.
And so it's really a framework to help you navigate each one of those periods in your motherhood journey
Mhm.
to not only make it feel more normal, but to maybe enjoy that part of it more because you know that what you're going through is normal.
Yes.
And then the other thing I have to say is important that I'm not sure that I think a lot of mothers feel, but it's not necessarily a condition that they have, which is, it's time to have an affair. I really like to talk about this whole chapter of it's time to have an affair. And what I
Yes.
mean by that is obviously not having an affair, like cheating on your husband, but
Sure.
having an affair with yourself again, because now that you've gone through this journey of becoming a mother, you're a completely different person. So you get this opportunity to not only reflect on things that used to light you up before you had a baby, but also now opening up a completely different world into new things that light you up in a different way, and making sure that you're trying to prioritize those things so that your cup is full and that you can be the best mom that you can be by being able to take care of you and your
Mhm.
aspirations and your dreams as well.
Mhm.
Because just because you become a mom doesn't mean that you're not you anymore. You still get to
Yes.
be you.
Yes.
And I think a lot of moms drown in that. They feel this guilt of wanting certain things for themselves. And I think
Mhm.
it's really important that they know that they deserve that, right? They deserve to have both.
Yes.
And so that's
Amazing.
that's another thing that I think is very important for women and moms to know in particular.
Yes, I am. I'm so excited about so many aspects of your book, and I'm excited to continue to go through the activities because I'm a very solution focused person. I like a nice tangible activity, something to put some energy in. I know we used to also talk about just kind of the art of holding and sitting in that space, and that can be a beautiful thing. I also just personally, I'm like, let me check some boxes, let me write some things down. So I'm really excited to continue in my own journey with your book, and kind of get the activities, and
Yeah.
all of that'll be really great for me. So so Amanda, I can't thank you enough for spending this time with me. It's such a delight. I was so grateful when you were so emphatically saying yes, when I reached out to you. So it's just nice to get to share your voice with everybody, and your experiences and your emotional labor for everybody. Where can everybody find you, and of course your book?
So you can find my book, The New Mom Code: Shatter Expectations and Crush It at Motherhood, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and pretty much anywhere where books are sold.
Mhm.
You can follow me on Instagram at Amanda Tice, Tice. And I also have a website, which is just amandatice.com. And I do periodic email updates, and you can find out more about me, my book, and my biography there.
Amazing. Well, thank you again. Thank you. Thank you. What a treat. Everyone go check out Amanda's socials, grab her book. You will love it. Be curious, not judgmental, and make it a good one.